Bella stroked the golden retriever gently and sighed. This was the worst, to leave Princess to her sister. But the opportunity, this might be the one-time opportunity to take the half-year agreement to work on the project in Barcelona. "I love you so much," she whispered to the fur, where she had cried and laughed whenever needed. But the flight would be in 3 hours, and it was time to take the leap far from all she knew and what kept her life in dull circle. The email had come a week ago from Dr. Elena Varga, lead archaeologist on what she called the most significant medieval discovery in decades. The subject line had been simple: translator needed, urgent, Barcelona. Bella had almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But something about the formal language, the university letterhead, and the mention of her specific expertise in medieval Catalan dialects had made her pause. Dr. Varga had somehow found her thesis on linguistic evolution in 13th century manuscripts, work that exactly 3 people had ever read, including her advisor. "We've uncovered a collection of texts that predate known Catalan literature by nearly a century," the email had explained. "Your analysis of semantic shifts in medieval Romance languages makes you uniquely qualified for this project. 6 months, full funding, Barcelona. Are you available?" Available? Bella had been working the same part-time translation jobs for 2 years, living in the same studio apartment, following the same routine that kept her safely invisible. The most exciting thing in her life was Princess's weekly vet visits. But here she was, 3 hours before her flight, finally ready to break free. "Take care of Princess," she told her sister Maya, who was already scrolling through her phone. "She likes her walks at sunrise, and she—" "Bella, relax. I raised a kid. I can handle a dog." Maya looked up with a grin. "Besides, you'll be back before you know it. Probably homesick within a month." That's what I'm afraid of, Bella thought, but she just hugged Princess one more time and grabbed her suitcase. Barcelona hit her like a wave of heat, sound, and colour. Even at 10 p.m, the streets pulsed with life. Bella's taxi wove through narrow medieval lanes where Gothic spires loomed against the star-scattered sky, past modernist buildings that seemed to flow like frozen music. The university district was quieter, but no less magical. Street lamps cast golden pools on cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Her apartment was a tiny third-floor walk-up with a balcony overlooking a courtyard where orange trees grew in neat rows. Bella set down her bags and stepped onto the balcony. The air smelled of jasmine and something else, something that made her skin tingle, like the moment before lightning strikes. She'd felt it since the plane had descended over the city, a strange electricity that seemed to dance along her nerves. Jet lag, she told herself, nothing more. But when she touched the iron railing, the metal felt warm despite the cool night air. And for just a moment she could have sworn she heard music, not from the street below, but from the stones themselves, as if the ancient city were humming with some deeper melody. Dr. Elena Varga was nothing like Bella had imagined. Instead of a dusty academic, she was a woman in her 40s with Silver Street dark hair, wearing jeans and a leather jacket that looked like it had seen actual adventures. Her office in the medieval studies building was chaos. Books stacked everywhere, artifacts scattered across tables, maps pinned to every available wall surface. "Ah, Dr. Morgan!" Elena stood and clasped Bella's hands warmly. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I hope the apartment suits you." "It's perfect, thank you. And please, just Bella." "Bella then. Coffee? You'll need it." Eleanor poured from a small espresso machine that looked incongruous among the medieval manuscripts. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about 13th century Catalonia." She led Bella through a maze of corridors to a climate-controlled basement room. Inside, 12 leather-bound volumes sat in individual display cases, their covers marked with symbols Bella had never seen before. Not quite Arabic, not quite Latin, something that seemed to shift and flow when she looked directly at it. We found them 3 months ago in a sealed chamber beneath the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, Eleanor explained. The chamber itself dates to 1247, but these... She gestured at the books. Carbon dating suggests they're at least 50 years older, which should be impossible. Bella moved closer to the nearest volume. The moment she approached, that tingling sensation returned, stronger than before. The symbols on the cover seemed to pulse with faint light. That's the other mystery, Elena continued, watching Bella's face carefully. They only react to certain people. Most of our team can't even see the markings clearly. But you have the track record of making wonders. She smiled. Look at them now. Bella looked down and gasped. The symbols were glowing, soft silver light that traced intricate patterns across the leather binding. As she watched, they began to shift, rearranging themselves into something almost recognizable. I don't understand, she whispered. Neither do we. That's why we need you. Eleanor moved to stand beside her. There's something else. We think these aren't just historical documents. We think they're active. Active? Read this. Eleanor handed her a single sheet of parchment covered in the same flowing script. Tell me what you see. Bella took the parchment, and the moment her fingers touched the ancient paper, the world exploded into sensation. The text blazed to life, shifting from incomprehensible symbols to clear, beautiful Catalan. The 21st Guardian approaches the threshold. When the stars align as they did at the founding, she who speaks the old tongue shall wake what sleeps in stone and shadow. But beneath the translation, Bella could feel something else. Emotions, images, memories that weren't her own. A woman with dark hair standing in this same chamber centuries ago. The sound of chanting. The taste of magic on the air. She dropped the parchment, stumbling backward. What is this place? Eleanor's eyes were bright with excitement and something that might have been fear. We think it's a school, a place where certain people learn to work with, let's call them natural forces that most of the world has forgotten. Magic, you mean? I prefer applied metaphysics, but yes, magic. Elena picked up the parchment carefully. The question is, Bella, are you ready to learn? That night, Bella couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw symbols burning in silver fire. She felt the weight of centuries pressing against her consciousness, whispers in languages she shouldn't understand but somehow did. At 3 a.m. she gave up and walked to her balcony. The courtyard below was silver in the moonlight, and the orange trees rustled in a breeze she couldn't feel. That electric sensation was stronger than ever, making her fingertips tingle and her heart race. Couldn't sleep either. Bella spun around and nearly lost her balance. A man was sitting on the neighbouring balcony, barely 6 feet away. How had she not noticed him before? Sorry, he continued, rising fluidly to his feet. I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Adrian Castillo, your neighbour. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight. There was something old-fashioned about his manner, a formality that seemed natural rather than affected. Bella Morgan, she managed. Yes, couldn't sleep. New city, you know. Ah, you're American. The accent. His English was perfect, with just a hint of Spanish warmth. What brings you to Barcelona? Work. I'm a translator. Medieval texts. She wasn't sure why she was being so forthcoming with a stranger, but something about him made her feel safe. Research project at the university. His expression shifted, became more alert. Medieval texts? How interesting. What period? 13th century mostly. Some really unusual manuscripts that... She trailed off. Something in his posture had changed, a sudden tension that made her think of a cat spotting prey. Unusual how? His voice was carefully casual. I probably shouldn't say. Confidentiality agreements and all that. Of course. But he was studying her face intently, as if searching for something. Forgive me, but have we met before? You seem familiar. No, I don't think so. I just arrived today. Strange. He moved closer to the railing that separated their balconies. I have a good memory for faces, but perhaps I knew someone who looked like you. There was something in his tone, a weight that suggested he wasn't talking about casual acquaintances. Bella found herself stepping closer as well, drawn by something she couldn't name. What do you do? She asked. I'm in preservation, he said. Old buildings, historical sites. I help maintain the past. That must be rewarding work. It is, though sometimes the past is more active than people realise. He was looking at her intently now, and Bella felt that electric sensation growing stronger. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual since you arrived? Dreams, perhaps, or strange sensations? Bella's breath caught. How did you... Because I've been waiting for you, he said simply. For someone like you, anyway. Someone who could wake them. Wake what? But before he could answer, a sound echoed through the courtyard, a deep, thrumming note that seemed to come from the stones themselves. The orange trees began to rustle more violently, and Bella could have sworn she saw lights flickering in the windows of buildings that should have been empty. It's starting, Adrian said, and there was both wonder and worry in his voice. Bella, tomorrow when you're working with those manuscripts, be careful. You're more powerful than you know, and there are those who would use that power for their own ends. I don't understand any of this. You will. He reached across the gap between their balconies and touched her hand briefly. His fingers were warm, and at the contact, Bella felt a surge of something that was definitely not electricity. It was deeper, older, like touching a ley line of the earth itself. Sweet dreams, he said softly, and then he was gone, stepping back into his apartment, as if he'd never been there at all. Bella stood on her balcony for a long time after that, listening to the city hum with hidden energies and wondering what exactly she'd gotten herself into. The next morning brought no clarity, only more questions. Elena was waiting for her in the manuscript room, but she wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood beside her, his pale eyes cold and calculating. Bella, this is Dr. Marcus Webb from the Hartwell Institute in London, Eleanor said, her voice carefully neutral. He's expressed interest in our project. Dr. Morgan. Webb stepped forward and offered his hand. Your reputation precedes you. Medieval linguistics, correct? Specialization in semantic evolution? There was something about his grip that made Bella want to pull away immediately. His palm was cold and slightly damp, and she felt an unpleasant crawling sensation when their skin touched. Dr. Varga has been showing me these remarkable manuscripts, Webb continued. Quite extraordinary. I understand you've already begun translation work? Just preliminary, Bella said carefully. Something in Eleanor's posture warned her to be cautious. Excellent. The Hartwell Institute would be very interested in acquiring these pieces for our collection. We have superior preservation facilities, and our funding could support a much more extensive research program. The manuscripts aren't for sale, Elena said firmly. They belong to the people of Catalonia. Webb's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Of course, though I'm sure arrangements could be made. Dr. Morgan, perhaps you could show me some of your initial translations? I'm particularly interested in any references to, let's call them practical applications. The way he said practical applications made Bella's skin crawl. She glanced at Eleanor, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. I'm afraid I haven't made much progress yet, Bella lied. The dialect is quite challenging. Naturally. Well, perhaps I could observe while you work. Sometimes a fresh perspective can be helpful. Actually, Elena interjected, we were just about to take a break. Bella, why don't you get some air? Dr. Webb, perhaps we could continue this conversation in my office. It wasn't really a suggestion. Elena's tone carried the authority of someone who'd spent years dealing with difficult colleagues and territorial disputes. But Webb's expression darkened, and for a moment, Bella could have sworn she felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Of course, he said smoothly. Though I do hope we'll have more time to discuss this project. I suspect there's much more to these manuscripts than meets the eye. As they left, Bella caught Webb looking back at her with an intensity that made her shiver. There was hunger in that gaze, and something else, a calculating coldness that reminded her of a snake sizing up its prey. She waited until their footsteps faded, then moved to the nearest manuscript. The moment she approached, the symbols began to glow again, brighter than before. This time, instead of fighting the sensation, she let herself sink into it. Danger walks in daylight, the text whispered in her mind. Trust the guardian who waits in shadow. Guardian. Adrian had used that word, said he'd been waiting for someone like her. Bella! She spun around, heart hammering. Adrian stood in the doorway, but he looked different in daylight, older somehow, with lines of strain around his eyes that hadn't been there the night before. How did you get in here? This area is restricted. I have my ways. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. We need to talk. That man who was just here, Webb, he's not who he claims to be. Elena seemed suspicious of him too. Elena's smart to be suspicious. The Hartwell Institute isn't a research organisation, it's a collection agency. They acquire artefacts with unusual properties and sell them to private collectors who don't ask questions about how they're used. Used for what? Adrian moved to stand beside her, and again Bella felt that warm, grounding sensation. Power, control. There are people who would use objects like these to manipulate others, to gain advantages that shouldn't exist in the modern world. And you're what? Some kind of supernatural security guard? Something like that. His smile was rueful. My family has been protecting sites like this for generations. We're called guardians, and we're bound to specific places or artifacts until our duty is complete. Bound how? Magic, Bella. The same force that lets you read those manuscripts. He gestured to the glowing symbols. The same power that called you here from halfway across the world. She wanted to argue, to insist that there had to be a rational explanation, but the evidence was literally glowing in front of her eyes. What happens now? Now you learn. The manuscripts aren't just historical documents, they're textbooks. They contain instructions for working with the natural energies that most people have forgotten how to perceive. He touched her hand gently. But learning isn't without risks. Webb won't give up easily, and there are others like him. Then why should I do this? Why not just go home? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Because you've felt it, haven't you? That sense that your life was incomplete, that you were waiting for something without knowing what it was? Bella's throat tightened. Yes. This is what you were waiting for, not just the magic, but the purpose. These manuscripts, this knowledge, it's been hidden for centuries, waiting for someone who could unlock it safely. His fingers intertwined with hers. Someone who could be trusted with real power. The manuscript case beside them pulsed with brighter light, and Bella felt the electric sensation spreading through her entire body. But this time, instead of being overwhelming, it felt like coming home. Teach me, she said. Adrian smiled, and for the first time since she'd arrived in Barcelona, Bella felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 weeks later, Bella could make flowers bloom with a touch and read the history of objects by holding them. The manuscripts had become as familiar as old friends, their silver script dancing through her dreams and waking thoughts alike. She'd also fallen completely, hopelessly in love with her guardian. It had happened gradually, through long evenings spent learning to channel the Earth's energy, through stolen moments on their shared balcony, watching the stars wheel overhead. Adrian was patient and gentle, guiding her through meditations that left her breathless with wonder, teaching her to feel the ancient magic that flowed through Barcelona's stones like a hidden river. But Webb hadn't given up. If anything, he'd become more persistent, appearing at the university with increasing frequency, pressing Eleanor with offers that grew more aggressive each time. "He knows you're making progress," Elena warned during one of their morning meetings. "Someone's been asking questions about you around the city. Professional curiosity doesn't usually involve private investigators." That evening, as Bella practiced drawing light from crystals in her apartment, she felt it, a wrongness in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. The orange trees in the courtyard were rustling frantically despite the still air, and every magical artifact in her room was glowing with warning light. A knock at her door made her freeze. "Bella, it's Dr. Webb. I was hoping we could talk." She stayed perfectly still, hardly breathing. She hadn't invited him up, and the building's front door was always locked. How had he gotten in? "I know you're there," Webb continued, his voice carrying an odd resonance that made her teeth ache. "I also know you've been making remarkable progress with the translations. Perhaps it's time we discussed a more collaborative arrangement." The door handle rattled. Then, impossibly, she heard the click of the lock disengaging. Bella grabbed her phone and texted Adrian frantically. "He's here. Help!" The response came immediately. "Balcony." Now she crept to her bedroom and slipped onto the balcony just as her front door swung open. Adrian was already there, reaching for her across the gap between their apartments. "Jump!" he whispered urgently. It was barely 6 feet, but the 3-story drop yawned below. Bella hesitated for a heartbeat, then heard Webb's footsteps moving through her apartment, and leaped. Adrian caught her easily, his arms strong and sure around her waist. For a moment they stood pressed together on his balcony, her heart hammering against his chest. "We can't keep running," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "It's time to end this." The confrontation came at midnight in the manuscript chamber. Webb was there waiting for them, no longer bothering to hide his true nature. The temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees, and frost covered the display cases despite the climate control. "Dr. Morgan," he said pleasantly, "how good of you to join me. And Adrian Castillo, or should I say, Adrian of House Castillo, last guardian of the Catalonian archives." "Webb." Adrian's voice was flat, dangerous. "You have no right to be here." "On the contrary, I have every right. These artifacts belong in proper hands, not mouldering away in some provincial university." Webb gestured, and the nearest display case cracked down the middle. "Bella, you've done excellent work translating the preliminary texts, but you've barely scratched the surface of what these manuscripts contain." "I know enough," Bella said, moving to stand beside Adrian. "I know they were hidden for good reason." Hidden by cowards who feared progress. Webb's pleasant mask was slipping, revealing something cold and hungry underneath. "Do you have any idea what you could accomplish with this knowledge? Weather control, influence over human emotions, the ability to reshape reality itself." "The ability to hurt people," Adrian corrected. Webb laughed. "Everything has the potential to hurt, Guardian." "Fire burns, but it also provides light and warmth. The question is whether power will be wielded by those wise enough to use it properly." "And you think that's you?" "I think it's certainly not you." Webb's eyes fixed on Bella. "You're powerful, my dear, but untrained, naive. You see magic as some kind of beautiful natural force, but it's a tool like any other. It should be used efficiently." The manuscripts around them began to glow brighter, responding to the magical tension in the room. Bella could feel their accumulated knowledge pressing against her consciousness, centuries of careful study, of power balanced with responsibility. "No," she said firmly, "magic isn't just a tool. It's alive. It has its own wisdom, its own purpose. And its purpose isn't to make anyone powerful. It's to keep the world in balance." Webb's expression darkened. "How disappointing. I'd hoped you'd be more reasonable." He raised his hand, and the air around him began to shimmer with cold, dark energy. But the moment his power touched the manuscripts, they erupted with silver light so brilliant it turned the room into a miniature sun. Bella felt the magic surge through her, not overwhelming this time, but welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. She reached out instinctively, and Adrian's hand found hers. Through their connection, she could feel his strength, his certainty, his absolute faith in her. Together they spoke a word that wasn't quite Spanish and wasn't quite Latin, but something older and more fundamental. The word for protection, for home, for love that guards what matters. Webb's dark energy shattered like glass against a stone wall. The frost on the display cases melted instantly, and the manuscripts settled into a warm, peaceful glow. "Impossible!" Webb gasped, staggering backward. "You're not trained enough, not strong enough." "She's not alone," Adrian said simply. And suddenly Bella understood. The Guardian's job wasn't to fight the darkness single-handedly. It was to protect those who could bring light. Adrian had been waiting not just for someone powerful enough to unlock the manuscripts, but for someone who understood that true power came from connection, from trust, from love. Webb fled without another word, his expensive shoes clicking rapidly across the stone floor. Bella doubted they'd see him again, at least not for a long while. In the peaceful quiet that followed, she turned to Adrian. "So what happens now?" "Now?" His smile was soft and full of promise. "Now you become the guardian of this place, these manuscripts. You teach others who are ready to learn responsibly." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "That is, if you want to stay." Bella looked around the chamber, at the manuscripts glowing gently in their cases, at the centuries of knowledge waiting to be explored. She thought about her old life, safe, small, predictable. Then she looked at Adrian, at the future they could build together in this magical city. "I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be," she said, and kissed him under the silver light of the ancient books. Outside, Barcelona hummed with hidden energy, and the orange trees rustled with what sounded remarkably like applause. The end.